I'd like to welcome in now aviation safety and NAS expert Philip Mann. Philip, great to see you. Thank you for your time today. So, of these most recent airline incidents, which Nancy kind of laid out there, which one stands out the most to you and why?
Well, the B-52 incident stands out the most to me because it's got a lot of the hallmarks of the January crash, the one that kind of got us started on this air traffic thought process. Because it has those same characteristics. There's a military aircraft operating near civilian aircraft. Nobody knows the military aircraft's there. They're relying on visual approaches, and I haven't heard anything affirmative or negative, but I kind of my impression is that the B-52 was probably also not using its ADSB. It was also not using all the "Hey, here I am" equipment that would have made it very easy for the commercial airliner and the commercial airliner's equipment and systems to see that the B-52 was there, regardless of whether a radar operator pointed it out.
You know, and as Nancy just reported there, we heard the pilot of that plane apologizing to his passengers after avoiding the B-52. I'd like to listen to that again.
You probably saw the airplane kind of sort of coming at us. Sorry about the aggressive maneuver. It caught me by surprise. This is not normal at all.
All right, Philip, so not normal at all. Do you think an apology or an explanation or whatever you want to call it was necessary in what really could have been a life or death situation there?
Well, I think it's good customer management, good expectation management, and if a pilot is commenting about an aggressive maneuver, it is something that might have scared a lot of people, or might have possibly even injured somebody if they weren't expecting it, if they were maybe kind of sitting crooked in their seat or something. So I think it was totally within a good practice as somebody who just experienced that kind of thing to close the loop for the passengers so they understand what happened. Now, certainly not the end of the story, but at least within the cockpit, if everybody's okay and then they get a little explanation about, hey, this is what happened, then folks aren't maybe going to get off the plane as jittery as they might be otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that would be extremely scary to be a passenger on there. Why do you think, Philip, that the pilot wasn't aware of that B-52 bomber, potentially being in his path and apparently being in his path?
Yeah, I suspect it's a lot of things. I mean, the pilot himself mentioned that the radar controller at Minot didn't point out that there was a B-52 flying around. So the air traffic controllers, and at Minot, they're going to be military air traffic controllers. They didn't point out that the B-52 is flying around. They didn't indicate, similar to what happened at Reagan. They didn't point out that, hey, there's a helicopter off in front of you to the side. Same thing. The air traffic controllers didn't point out that there's this bomber. Additionally, and I suspect that the bomber wasn't using its ADSB equipment. It's the equipment within the bomber that would tell the rest of the world, hey, here I am and here's where I'm going, because that equipment will communicate directly to the commercial airliner, and they would see it on their scope, and it's designed to work when there's not good radar coverage. And up in that area, up in the Dakotas and there's not super great radar coverage everywhere, because there's just not a lot of air routes there, not a lot of people live in that area. But they do. That's part of the reason why we have ADSB, why we have this equipment that's designed for one aircraft to tell another. It comes out of aircraft operating in Alaska, where there is very little radar and lots and lots of NATS airplanes, and they do need to know where each other is. And this is one of those circumstances where I suspect the deference to the military aviators and the military operations saying, hey, you guys know what you're doing, go ahead and figure it out. That deference, rather than making them play by the rules of all the commercial airliners, is what contributed to this.
Yeah, and luckily we are not talking about a tragedy, just a mistake, which hopefully will incite some change. All right, so Philip, let's talk about that Alaska Airlines system-wide outage. They called it temporary. Planes are up and running today, but the company says it was due to an IT outage. Do you think we will see more of these IT outages? What needs to change here so more flights aren't grounded?
Yeah, well, I think it's an important distinction here to note that this is Alaska Airlines internal software. This is not FAA software that's managing flights everywhere. This is Alaska Airlines, some combination of their flight management and scheduling software. It's fairly well known in the industry that a lot of airlines have older scheduling systems, older software operating, partially because it mostly works and it does what they needed to do the vast majority of the time. It has a downside of a lot of stuff is so tightly integrated that you get something like this where you might have a relatively minor bug, in the bigger picture, a relatively minor bug, but it creates this cascade of failures because one flight can't take off. That means the flight behind it can't take off. That means the flight behind it can't take off. And that just kind of cascades through the system. Um, I suspect over time, we're probably going to maybe start seeing more of these as we get more and more aircraft flying and more operators out there. We're just going to hit the maximum capacity of some of these systems. But these are individual airline systems that need to work within there. And I think those will probably be easier to upgrade and easier to integrate than some of the bigger proposals. So this might be a short-term win if they could get some kind of federal standards or some kind of federal initiative to kind of line these things up.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Philip Mann, great to speak to you as always. Thank you.